Admiral Sarah Nicholson stood before the massive tactical display in the war room of New Geneva Command, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the crimson tide that had swept across Earth's continents. 26 years. 26 years since the first Orc warships had torn through the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls gleaming with an alien malevolence that humanity had never imagined possible. The holographic projection showed what remained of their world, North America, carved in half by the Midwest devastation zone where Orc fortress cities squatted like metallic cancers on the landscape. Europe, reduced to scattered resistance pockets hidden in the Alps and Carpathians. Africa, entirely lost save for Madagascar. Australia and South America, holding on by threads of stubbornness and strategic mountain ranges. "Admiral," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Colonel Marcus Webb, her chief intelligence officer, approaching with a data tablet clutched in his scarred hands. Webb had lost his left arm in the Battle of Berlin 15 years ago, and the synthetic replacement still moved with mechanical precision that reminded everyone of how much they'd all sacrificed. "What is it, Marcus?" Sarah's voice carried the weight of command, but also the exhaustion that came from nearly 3 decades of seemingly endless warfare. "Ma'am, we've confirmed it. The Kolthak Nexus." Webb's words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Our deep reconnaissance teams have finally located the primary Orc command structure. It's massive, Admiral. Buried 3 kilometers beneath the former Yellowstone region." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Kolthak Nexus. For years it had been little more than intelligence speculation, a theoretical nerve center that coordinated the Orcs' terrifyingly efficient military operations across the globe. Every tactical analyst agreed that such a facility had to exist. The Orcs' coordination was too perfect, their responses too swift, their strategic movements too synchronized to be managed by individual field commanders alone. "Show me," she commanded. Webb activated his tablet, and the room's holographic display shifted. The familiar devastation map dissolved, replaced by cross-sectional imagery of underground structures that defied human engineering capabilities. Vast chambers connected by tunnels wide enough to accommodate their enormous troop transports. Processing centers where captured human technology was reverse-engineered and improved upon. And at the center, a spire of crystalline material that pulsed with an eerie blue light. "The central spire appears to be some form of quantum communication array," Webb explained, his synthetic fingers dancing across the tablet's surface to highlight different sections. "Our xenobiologists believe it allows near-instantaneous coordination with Orc forces across the planet, and possibly even with their homeworld fleet." Sarah stepped closer to the display, her mind already racing through possibilities. "How certain are we of these schematics?" 93% confidence, ma'am. We lost 14 deep reconnaissance teams gathering this intel over the past 8 months. But Dr. Chen's analysis is thorough. She's staked her reputation on the accuracy. Dr. Elena Chen, their chief xenotechnology specialist, had been studying Orc technology since the early days of the war. If anyone could read alien architectural patterns and energy signatures, it was her. Sarah made a mental note to speak with Chen personally. "Defenses?" Sarah asked. Webb's expression darkened. "Extensive. The Nexus is protected by overlapping shield generators, automated defense platforms, and an estimated 40,000 Orc warriors in permanent garrison. But Admiral..." He paused, meeting her gaze. "If we could destroy this facility, our models suggest it would create a coordination collapse across their entire planetary operation." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd been thinking the same thing. Without their command nexus, the Orc forces would be reduced to individual units operating on last known orders. Their coordination advantage, the very thing that had allowed them to conquer most of Earth despite humanity's numerical superiority, would evaporate overnight. "How long would we have?" she asked. "Before they re-establish command structure?" Dr. Chen estimates anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on their backup protocols. "But ma'am, that could be enough. Enough to launch coordinated counteroffensives, to retake key strategic positions while they're in disarray." For the first time in years, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The briefing room in New Geneva Command had seen better days. Scorch marks from the Orc bombardment 8 years ago still decorated one wall, and the conference table bore the scars of hasty repairs made with whatever materials could be scavenged. But it was here that humanity's last strategic minds gathered to plan what might be their final gambit. Admiral Nicholson sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the battered leadership of the human resistance. General Patricia Kowalski commanded what remained of the North American ground forces from her mobile headquarters somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Chen Lu represented the Pacific Fleet, though his fleet now consisted mainly of converted civilian vessels and 3 remaining nuclear submarines. Dr. Elena Chin, the Xenotech specialist, had traveled from her hidden laboratory in the Swiss Alps. And representing the European resistance, Colonel Viktor Petrov appeared via secure quantum link from an undisclosed location. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "After 26 years of defensive warfare, we finally have a target that could change everything." The holographic display activated, showing the Kolthak Nexus in all its alien complexity. Several people around the table leaned forward, their battle-hardened faces reflecting mixtures of awe and determination. "Dr. Chen, please brief them on what we're looking at." Elena Chen stood, her slight frame belying the fierce intelligence in her eyes. "The Nexus represents the single most sophisticated alien construct we've encountered. The central spire isn't just a communication array, it's a quantum consciousness interface. The Orcs don't just coordinate through it, they actually share tactical awareness in real time." General Kowalski whistled low. "No wonder they've been so damn effective. It's like fighting an enemy that shares a hive mind." "Exactly," Chen continued. "But that's also their weakness. The system creates a dependency. Remove the Nexus, and their individual units will experience something equivalent to sensory deprivation. They'll still fight, but they'll be isolated, confused, operating on instinct rather than coordinated strategy." Admiral Lu leaned back in his chair. "Assuming we can get to it. Webb's intelligence report shows defenses that would make the old NORAD complex look like a children's playground. Which brings us to the plan," Sarah said, standing and moving to the display. "Operation Last Light." The hologram shifted, showing a complex 3-dimensional tactical overlay. Flight paths appeared as glowing lines, originating from multiple points and converging on the Nexus location. "We're going to hit them with everything we have, all at once," Sarah continued. "A coordinated assault from 4 directions, designed to overwhelm their defensive systems through sheer volume and timing precision." Colonel Petrov's voice crackled through the quantum link. "Admiral, with respect, we've tried saturation attacks before. Their shields and point defense systems are too advanced." "Not like this," Sarah replied. "This isn't just about firepower, Victor. We're going to use their own technology against them." She gestured, and the display zoomed in on specific elements of the plan. "Dr. Chen has been working on something called a resonance bomb. It's designed to interact destructively with the quantum frequencies their technology operates on." Chen nodded. "We've managed to replicate the basic harmonic patterns we've observed in their equipment. If we can deliver a sufficient resonance pulse directly to the Nexus spire, it should create a cascade failure throughout their entire network. The catch," Sarah continued, "is delivery. The bomb has to be placed manually, by hand, at the base of the central spire. And given the Nexus's depth and defensive systems, this is essentially a one-way mission." The room fell silent. After nearly 3 decades of war, they all understood what she was really saying. General Kowalski was the first to speak. "How many volunteers would you need?" "A small team. Maybe 8 to 12 people. Specialists in infiltration, demolitions, and close-quarters combat. They'll need to penetrate 3 kilometers of hostile territory, place the device, and activate it manually." "I'll go," came a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Captain James Rodriguez, Sarah's aide-de-camp, standing at attention. "Ma'am, I request permission to lead the infiltration team." Sarah felt a pang of loss before the mission had even begun. Rodriguez had been with her for 12 years, ever since she'd pulled him out of the ruins of Mexico City. He was like a son to her, and the thought of sending him to certain death. Captain, the selection process hasn't. With respect, Admiral, we both know I'm the best choice. I've run more deep penetration missions than anyone else still alive. I know Orc tactical patterns, I speak their language, and I've actually been inside one of their smaller command posts. That last point was true. Rodriguez had led the intelligence mission that had captured their first intact Orc communication device, the breakthrough that had eventually led them to develop the resonance bomb technology. James, Sarah began, then stopped herself. This wasn't the time for personal sentiment. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Very well, Captain. But you'll follow standard volunteer protocols. Anyone who wants off this mission can leave, no questions asked, no black marks. Understood, ma'am. Admiral Liu cleared his throat. Admiral Nicholson, even if the infiltration succeeds, we'll need to coordinate the external assault perfectly. If we hit too early, we alert them to the threat. Too late, and we lose the window after the Nexus goes down. Exactly, Sarah replied. Which is why we're going to need every resource we can muster. General Kowalski, I need you to coordinate the ground assault from the east. Hit their outer perimeter facilities to draw attention away from the Nexus itself. Consider it done. I've got 3 mechanized divisions that have been itching for a real fight. Admiral Liu, your submarines will need to launch our remaining nuclear-tipped torpedoes at their coastal installations. Make them think we're trying a full amphibious assault. My crews are ready, Admiral. Colonel Petrov, the European resistance will need to create diversions across the Atlantic theater. Make them think we're planning something in the Mediterranean. We have been preparing for such operations. Sarah looked around the table at these leaders who had fought alongside her for so many years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Our last real chance to take back our world. If Operation Last Light fails, the human race will likely spend the rest of its existence as a conquered people. She paused, letting that reality sink in. But if we succeed, if we can blind their coordination and scatter their forces, we'll have the opportunity to drive them off Earth permanently. Questions? Dr. Chen raised her hand. Timeline, Admiral? 72 hours. That's how long it'll take to position all our assets and complete final preparations for the resonance bomb. We strike simultaneously at 0400 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, 3 days from now. Ma'am, General Kowalski interjected. What about civilian populations in the target areas? Sarah's expression hardened. It was the question she'd been dreading. The Nexus is located in what used to be Wyoming and Montana. According to our latest intelligence, approximately 50,000 humans are being held in labor camps within the operational zone. The room fell silent again. 50,000 people. In the old world before the war, such a number would have represented an unacceptable loss of life. But after 26 years of occupation, with billions already dead, we'll do everything possible to minimize civilian casualties, Sarah continued. But we cannot allow humanitarian concerns to compromise the mission. If we fail here, those 50,000 people will remain slaves for the rest of their lives anyway. It was the cold mathematics of total war, and everyone in the room understood it, even if they didn't like it. Final question, Admiral Liu said. What's our fallback position if the mission fails? Sarah met his gaze steadily. There isn't one, Admiral. We commit everything to this operation. Win or die. The armory beneath New Geneva Command had been carved out of solid granite during the early years of the war, when it became clear that humanity would need to prepare for a very long conflict. Now, Captain Rodriguez stood before a wall of weapons and equipment, selecting gear for what everyone knew would be humanity's most crucial mission. Captain, came a voice behind him. Rodriguez turned to see Sergeant Major Maria Santos approaching. Santos was a legend among the resistance fighters, a former Brazilian Special Forces operative who had somehow managed to survive every major engagement of the war. Her dark eyes held the kind of steady resolve that came from seeing civilization collapse and choosing to keep fighting anyway. Sergeant Major, Rodriguez nodded. I take it you're volunteering? Wouldn't miss it for the world. Santos replied with a grim smile. Besides, someone needs to keep you young officers from getting killed too quickly. Over the next few hours, the rest of the infiltration team assembled. Corporal Yuki Tanaka, a Japanese communications specialist who could interface with Orc technology better than almost anyone alive. Lieutenant Thomas Bishop, a demolitions expert whose calm precision under fire had earned him a near-mythical reputation. Staff Sergeant Anna Volkov, a Russian sniper whose kill count against Orc officers was measured in the hundreds. Private First Class David Kim, a medic whose innovative battlefield surgery had saved more resistance fighters than anyone could count. They were joined by 3 more volunteers: Corporal Sarah Mitchell, an engineer who specialized in alien technology; Sergeant Robert Chin, no relation to Dr. Elena Chin, a former U.S. Navy SEAL who had become expert in underwater infiltration techniques; and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, a veteran officer who had requested to join the mission personally. 9 people. 9 volunteers who understood they were walking into certain death for a chance to save their species. Admiral Nicholson arrived as they were conducting their final equipment checks. She watched them work with a mixture of pride and sorrow. These were some of humanity's finest warriors, and she was sending them to die. "Captain Rodriguez," she called out. "A word." They stepped aside from the group, finding a quiet corner near the communications array. "James, I want you to know that if there were any other way—" "Admiral, with respect, there isn't. We both know that. These bastards have had us on the run for 26 years. This is our shot." Sarah nodded, then reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device, a personal communicator with quantum encryption capabilities. "This is a direct link to my personal command frequency," she said, handing it to him. "If, when you reach the Nexus, I want to be the last person you speak to before you activate the device." Rodriguez took the communicator, understanding the weight of what she was giving him. "Admiral, it's been an honor serving under your command." "The honor has been mine, Captain." They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding that this was goodbye. "Sir!" Sergeant Major Santos called out. "Teams ready for final briefing." Rodriguez nodded to the Admiral, then returned to his team. They gathered around a tactical display showing their infiltration route, a nightmarish path through 3 kilometers of Orc-controlled territory, past automated defenses, guard posts, and patrol routes that had been mapped through months of surveillance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rodriguez began, "our insertion point is here." He indicated a location roughly 15 kilometers from the Nexus entrance. "We'll be dropped by stealth transport at 0200 hours, giving us 2 hours to reach the perimeter before the main assault begins." Corporal Tanaka raised her hand. "Sir, intelligence reports suggest the Orcs have been upgrading their sensor networks. How do we know we won't be detected on approach?" "We don't," Rodriguez replied honestly. "But Dr. Chin has provided us with signal scramblers based on their latest analysis of Orc detection algorithms. They should mask our heat signatures and electronic emissions for at least 4 hours." Lieutenant Bishop leaned forward. "What about the resonance bomb itself, sir? How do we transport something that sensitive through a combat zone?" Rodriguez gestured to a reinforced case sitting nearby. "The device is EMP hardened and shock resistant. Sergeant Major Santos and I will carry it between us using a modified field stretcher. The bomb itself weighs about 40 kilograms, but the shielding brings the total to nearly 80. Staff Sergeant Volkov spoke up in her accented English. "Captain, what is extraction plan?" The question hung in the air. Everyone knew the answer, but someone had to say it out loud. "There isn't one, Sergeant. This is a one-way trip. Once we activate the resonance bomb, the quantum cascade will destroy the Nexus, but it will also create an energy pulse that will kill anyone within a kilometer of the spire." The team absorbed this information with the stoic acceptance of professional soldiers who had long ago made peace with the possibility of death in service to something greater than themselves. Private Kim, the medic, was the one who finally broke the silence. "So we're talking about a suicide mission?" "Yes," Rodriguez replied simply. "Anyone who wants out can leave now. No judgment, no consequences. This is completely voluntary." He looked around the circle of faces, seeing determination rather than fear. These were people who had lost everything to the Orcs: families, homes, entire civilizations. For them, this mission represented not just military necessity, but personal revenge. All right then, Rodriguez continued. Let's go over the timeline one more time. We infiltrate at 0200, reach the Nexus perimeter by 0400, penetrate the facility by 0430, locate the central spire by 0500, and detonate at 0530. The external assault begins at 0400, giving us exactly 90 minutes to complete our mission before our own forces potentially compromise the target. Corporal Mitchell, the engineer, pointed to the facility schematics. Sir, what if the internal layout doesn't match our intelligence? These tunnels could be mazes. That's why Corporal Tanaka is along, Rodriguez replied. She'll be carrying a modified Orc navigation device that should interface with their internal guidance systems. If our maps are wrong, she'll hopefully be able to get us updated directions. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, who had been quiet during most of the briefing, finally spoke. Captain, I've been thinking about our approach vector. Intelligence suggests this entrance here. He pointed to the display. But what if we use the secondary access point? It's more heavily defended, but if they're expecting an infiltration, they'll be watching the obvious routes. Rodriguez considered this. Thompson was right. Sometimes the most dangerous path was actually the safest, because it was the one the enemy least expected. Good point, Colonel. We'll reassess the route during transit. If conditions favor the secondary approach, we'll switch. Sergeant Chin checked his chronometer. Sir, transport leaves in 30 minutes. Rodriguez nodded. Final equipment check, then we move out. Remember, once we're in the field, communication blackout until we reach the target. We can't risk giving away our position. As the team dispersed to collect their gear, Rodriguez felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. 9 lives in his hands, and the fate of humanity riding on their success. He had led dangerous missions before, but nothing like this. He picked up the resonance bombs control unit, a device about the size of a smartphone, with a simple activation sequence that would trigger the quantum cascade. Dr. Chin had explained that once activated, they would have approximately 90 seconds before the energy release became lethal to organic life. 90 seconds to say goodbye to the world. The stealth transport Shadow 7 had been humanity's most advanced aircraft before the war, designed for deep penetration missions against sophisticated air defense networks. Now, after 26 years of constant modification and repair, it was held together by determination and prayer as much as by metal and electronics. Rodriguez and his team sat in the aircraft's cramped cargo bay, watching the landscape scroll beneath them through the pilot's forward display. What had once been the American Midwest was now an alien hellscape. Orc industrial complexes dotted the terrain like metallic tumors, connected by transportation corridors that carved straight lines across the countryside with no regard for human geography. Approaching IP, announced Lieutenant Sarah Park, their pilot. 10 minutes to insertion. Rodriguez keyed his helmet comm. Final comms check. Sound off. Santos green. Tanaka green. Bishop green. Volkov green. Kim green. Mitchell green. Chen green. Thompson green. Rodriguez green. All systems nominal. Through the aircraft sensors, they could see Orc patrol aircraft in the distance, sleek, angular craft that moved with predatory grace through the night sky. The Shadow 7 stealth systems were based on pre-war technology that was probably obsolete against Orc sensors, but it was all they had. 2 minutes to insertion, Park announced. Target LZ is clear of hostiles, but we've got patrol activity approximately 8 clicks to the east. Rodriguez stood and began the final equipment distribution. Each team member carried specialized gear for their role, but everyone also carried enough basic supplies to survive independently for 48 hours if necessary. Not that they expected to live that long. The resonance bomb itself was secured in its transport case, connected to both Rodriguez and Santos by tactical straps. If one of them was killed, the other could continue the mission alone. 30 seconds, Park called out. The aircraft's rear cargo door began to open, revealing the dark landscape below. Cold night air rushed into the cabin, carrying with it the smell of smoke and ozone that seemed to permeate everywhere the Orcs had established a presence. Green light! Go, go, go! The team rappelled from the aircraft in swift succession, their dark forms disappearing into the shadows below. Rodriguez went last, carrying his half of the bomb's weight as he descended toward what might be humanity's last hope. They landed in a depression that had once been a farm field, now overgrown with alien vegetation that the Orcs had introduced to support their industrial processes. The plants gave off a faint phosphorescent glow that helped them see but also made Rodriguez nervous about detection. Shadow 7 departing, came Park's voice over their tactical radios. Good hunting, people! The sound of the aircraft's engines faded quickly, leaving them alone in enemy territory. Rodriguez activated his navigation system and oriented the team toward their target. According to the latest intelligence, they were 14.7 kilometers from the Nexus entrance, a distance they needed to cover in 2 hours while avoiding detection by one of the most sophisticated surveillance networks on the planet. Column formation, Rodriguez whispered into his comm. Volkov on point, 50 meters ahead. Chen and Mitchell on flanks. Everyone else maintains visual contact with the man in front. Silent signals only from this point forward. They began moving across the alien landscape, using natural depressions and the strange phosphorescent vegetation for concealment. The Orc-modified plants grew in unnatural patterns that actually provided better cover than human agriculture ever had, though the irony of hiding behind alien flora wasn't lost on any of them. After 30 minutes of movement, Staff Sergeant Volkov held up a closed fist, the signal for immediate halt. Through his scope, Rodriguez could see what had caught her attention, an Orc patrol moving perpendicular to their route, approximately 300 meters ahead. The patrol consisted of 6 Orc warriors in their characteristic powered armor, plus what appeared to be a hover platform mounting some kind of sensor array. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their augmented bodies covering ground at a pace that would have challenged an Olympic sprinter. Rodriguez watched them through his binoculars, noting their patrol pattern and timing. The Orcs followed their route with the predictability of machines, which made sense given their cybernetic enhancements. But it also meant that once their pattern was understood, they could be avoided. He signaled for the team to wait while the patrol passed, then motioned for them to continue moving. They had lost 15 minutes, but they were still on schedule. The landscape began to change as they approached the Nexus perimeter. The alien vegetation gave way to more obviously artificial structures, sensor towers that swept the terrain with beams of coherent energy, defensive positions that could deploy automated weapons at a moment's notice, and the ever-present glow of Orc energy barriers. "Sir," Corporal Tanaka whispered through her comm, "I'm picking up increasing electromagnetic activity ahead. We're definitely approaching something big." Rodriguez checked his chronometer. They had been moving for 90 minutes and covered approximately 12 kilometers. The Nexus entrance should be visible soon. Then he saw it. Rising from what had once been the Yellowstone region, a massive structure of alien metal and crystal stretched toward the sky. The entrance to the Kolthak Nexus was a geometric impossibility, angles that hurt to look at directly, surfaces that seemed to shift and flow when observed peripherally. And surrounding it, a defensive perimeter that would have impressed the ancient builders of fortress cities. "Target acquired," Rodriguez breathed into his comm. "Beginning final approach." This was where their mission would truly begin, or where it would end before it had really started. The Kolthak Nexus entrance was a monument to alien engineering that defied human understanding of physics and aesthetics. As Rodriguez and his team crept closer through the pre-dawn darkness, the structure's impossible geometry became more apparent. Corridors that seemed to fold back on themselves, support beams that intersected at angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, and a central core that pulsed with the same unsettling blue light they had seen in the intelligence briefings. "Jesus," whispered Corporal Mitchell over the comm. "How are we supposed to navigate that?" "Same way we navigate anything else," Santos replied. "One step at a time." Rodriguez studied the entrance through his scope, cataloging the defensive systems they would need to bypass. Energy barriers created shimmering curtains of force across potential access points. Automated weapon platforms tracked in slow, mechanical arcs, their sensors sweeping for any sign of intruders. And patrolling between the static defenses, more orc warriors moved in patterns that overlapped to eliminate any blind spots. "Tanaka," Rodriguez subvocalized. "Can you interface with any of their systems from here?" The communications specialist was already working with a device that looked like a hybrid between human electronics and salvaged orc technology. "Partial access, sir. I'm reading their patrol schedules and sensor sweep patterns. There's a gap in coverage at the eastern entrance, but it only lasts for 90 seconds every 12 minutes. Rodriguez checked his chronometer. 0347 hours. They were running out of time. "When's the next gap?" 4 minutes 30 seconds. "Can you scramble their sensors when the window opens?" "For maybe 2 minutes, sir. But once they detect the interference, they'll go to high alert." "That'll have to be enough. Everyone ready?" The team confirmed their readiness through hand signals. They had rehearsed this type of infiltration dozens of times, but never against defenses this sophisticated. "Gap opening in 30 seconds, Tanaka reported. Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase as adrenaline flooded his system. After 26 years of war, after all the battles and losses and small victories, it was coming down to this moment. "No," Tanaka whispered. They moved. 9 figures in adaptive camouflage burst from concealment and sprinted toward the eastern entrance. Rodriguez and Santos carried the resonance bomb between them, its weight seeming to grow heavier with each step. Behind them, the rest of the team maintained a protective formation, weapons ready to engage any threat that emerged. The energy barrier ahead shimmered and flickered as Tanaka's interference took effect. For a crucial few seconds, the deadly field that would have instantly killed any organic intruder was reduced to harmless light. They dove through the opening just as the barrier began to reassert itself. Inside the Nexus, the architecture was even more disorienting. Corridors stretched away in directions that seemed to bend through dimensions human minds weren't equipped to process. The walls themselves appeared to be alive, covered in a network of crystalline structures that pulsed with data traffic. "Which way?" Bishop asked, his voice tight with the strain of trying to navigate impossible geometry. Tanaka was already interfacing with an access panel, her modified equipment connecting to the Orc navigation systems. "Down," she said after a moment. "The central spire is 3 kilometers directly beneath us, but the path, it's not straight." Rodriguez checked his chronometer again. 0353 hours. They had 37 minutes to reach the spire and activate the bomb before the external assault began. "Lead the way, Corporal." They descended into the Nexus through corridors that defied physics and challenged sanity. The team moved in single file, following Tanaka's directions as she guided them through a 3-dimensional maze that seemed designed to confuse human spatial perception. "Contact," Volkov announced from her position at point. Ahead, an Orc patrol was approaching, 4 warriors in full combat armor, their cybernetic enhancements making them appear more machine than organic. In the confined space of the corridor, a firefight would be loud, messy, and likely fatal for both sides. "Take them quiet," Rodriguez ordered. What followed was a perfectly choreographed ballet of violence. Volkov's sniper rifle coughed once, sending a subsonic round through the lead Orc's optical sensors. Santos and Chin moved simultaneously, their combat knives finding the gaps in alien armor with surgical precision. The 4th Orc managed to raise an alarm device before Bishop's garrote ended its existence. "Alarm sent," Tanaka reported, monitoring Orc communications. "They know we're here." Rodriguez felt their window of opportunity closing. "How much farther?" 2.3 kilometers. "But sir, the direct path takes us through their main barracks level." "Alternate route?" "Adds 12 minutes to our travel time." 12 minutes they didn't have. Rodriguez made the decision that would likely doom them all. Direct route. Double time. They ran through corridors filled with alien architecture and growing sounds of pursuit. Behind them, Orc security forces were mobilizing, They could hear the distinctive whine of hover platforms and the mechanical thunder of heavy combat units moving to intercept. "Left here," Tanaka called out, guiding them around a corner that seemed to fold space back on itself. They emerged onto a vast platform overlooking the Nexus's central chamber. Below them, hundreds of Orc technicians worked at control stations that managed their planetary occupation. And in the center of it all, the spire, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, its surfaces reflecting light that wasn't quite the right color. "There," Rodriguez breathed. "That's our target." But between them and the spire stretched a gauntlet of defensive positions, automated weapons, and increasingly frantic Orc security forces. "Sir," Kim, the medic, pointed to their left. "Service access tunnel. Looks like it leads directly to the spire level." Rodriguez studied the route. It was narrow, probably designed for maintenance rather than combat, but it would get them where they needed to go. "Move!" They squeezed into the access tunnel just as the first Orc response units reached their previous position. Behind them, alien voices shouted commands in their harsh, mechanical language. The tunnel was barely large enough for humans, clearly designed for the smaller Orc technician caste. Rodriguez and Santos had to angle the bombs-carrying case carefully to navigate the tight confines, while the rest of the team crawled forward on hands and knees. "Exit ahead," Thompson reported from the front of the column. They emerged into the central spire chamber, a space that challenged every assumption about architecture and engineering. The crystalline spire rose from the floor like a frozen tower of alien thought, its surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move when observed directly. And surrounding it, a final defensive ring of 12 Orc guards in the heaviest combat armor Rodriguez had ever seen. "Shit," Santos muttered. Rodriguez checked his chronometer one last time. 0427 hours. 3 minutes until the external assault began, which meant 3 minutes to place and activate the resonance bomb. "Contact front," he announced to his team. 12 hostiles in heavy armor. We need to clear them fast and clean." But before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The external assault had begun early.